Good morning. I'm Pijush. I'm working with Azim Premji University as a faculty over there. But I'm from Assam and I'm born and brought up in Arunachal Pradesh. And I have been working in the state of Arunachal Pradesh for almost 18 years for community-based natural resource management. Uh, so first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to come over and share some of the experience that I had from the field. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank my elders, friends, and community members from Thambang village, who actually in 2004, when I went to them and had a discussion about how to start a new model of conservations at that point of a time where community will take lead in deciding how to manage their resources. The idea was very raw, and I was also not sure what I was trying to do, but they really supported me and came together to notify the first CCA of Arunachal Pradesh in 2004. And second, the villagers from Lumpo and Muchut from the Jimithang, where again they came together in the year 2007 and notified one more CCA. The village panchayat notified one more CCA. So in that process, like though my ground level engagement with them has stopped since 2013, I'm no more walking in the ground with them, but I'm still in contact with them. I keep on kind of interacting with them. And in the process, I have learned a lot. So today what I'll be sharing is mostly the whatever I have learned from them while working with them in the field. And also what I will try to share is basically there are lots of opportunities, though now we are talking about the prospects of community-based conservations globally. But if we talk about Northeast, there is a huge prospect. And if you look at really the opportunities from the legal point of view, there are many unused legal opportunities which for some reasons, strange reasons, we are not using to support and strengthen community-based natural resource management in the region. So I'll discuss some of those provisions. Third thing is that obviously, though there is no doubt about why we want to do community-based conservations, but what I have seen in the last almost like 20 years is that the way different organizations are adopting the strategy to do the community-based conservations varies a lot. Though the objective doesn't vary, but the way we are doing it in the field varies a lot. And I think there's a good time now to really sit down and have a brainstorming of what is the, obviously can't have a very, very uniform way of doing community-based conservations. It will have, because the beauty of community-based conservation is the diversity. Yeah, so we can't have a uniform or one kind of a system for, but there can be some underlying principles which we shouldn't miss out, which actually is required to ensure that community are really benefited from this community-based conservation. So that it is not just kind of an happening just for namesake, it is obviously contributing towards the well-being of community, as well as also it is contributing towards achieving the ecological goal. So I'll discuss some of it, some of the points that I have in my mind, and I hope we can have lots of discussions on those points. So to start with, my co-panelist has highlighted some of the limitations of protected areas. So in addition, what I will like to say that obviously one of the important limitations of protected area is that the cost and benefit of conservation success is not equitably shared. There are local communities who normally pay the cost of conservations because it's their livestock, it's their house which are getting damaged or are being just kind of by the wildlife. The success of conservation is enjoyed by the global community. So when a model where cost and benefit is not equitably shared, there is a serious questions about its sustainability. Also, if you look at most of the protected area, if you look at in the map, these are like small islands. Yeah, so we, as an ecologist, we know that these scattered islands which are isolated, it is not a very secure space to conserve our biodiversity for the futures because those islands have its own limitations. So there are various limitations of protected area model that we have been following so far, but obviously it has lots of contribution also, I'll say. But when we talk about community-based conservations, we also need to keep in mind that there are certain challenges that we should be aware about. One of it is obviously, as my co-panelist says, that community is very dynamic. So now community is moving fast towards market-based economy from their traditional subsistence economy. And there are higher political and market influence on them. There are lots of major projects that are coming up. If we talk about Northeast, which is leading to lots of kind of disruptions in the traditional societies. Also that we have been found that because the threats and challenges are emerging day by day. New kinds of threats and challenges are coming up day by day. But in same pace, the traditional management systems which was there in place are not evolving. Say for example, now there is a huge illegal wildlife trade nexus. But many of our traditional natural resource management systems are not equipped enough to deal with that kind of challenges. There are now problem of climate change. There are now problem of waste depositions. So many of our traditional systems, unfortunately, has not evolved to address or to kind of deal with these new threats and challenges that are emerging. Also as a conservation organizations, it is very much obvious sometimes what we do, the biggest mistake that we try to impose our conservation objective on community. But we have to, this is something which is the biggest blunder we normally do, that we try to impose that this is an endangered animal, this is a critically threatened wildlife, or this is a biodiversity, high value, globally threatened. So we try to convince community for conservation. But we have to keep in mind that community has their own objective of conservation. So the trick is how we come up with a trade-off between their objectives and our objectives. Yeah. Also, we have to keep in mind that traditionally the conservation practice of the community was mostly about allocating the resources. And now we are talking about conserving the resources. So this is a huge shift that we are expecting from the community. So these are some of the things which we should keep in mind when we are engaging with community for conservation. Now if you come to the northeastern states, I have not included Sikkim here. So if you look at that, obviously you have a huge forest area in most of the states. And what is interesting is the last row where you see the forest which is we normally call unclassed state forest. These are the forests which are de facto in some places de jure under the customary rights of the local indigenous tribal community. Now if you look at the total amount of forest under this USF category, it is actually 14% of the total forest of India. So community, the traditional community of northeastern states are in control of 14% of the total forest of India. So now you can imagine when you talk about securing the biodiversity of India, how much important role the community of Northeast India can play on. But if you look at what is happening to our forest, in last 20 years analysis, almost every state has lost the forest cover. Yeah, lost the forest cover. There are various regions, and the major loss has been in the Nagaland, in Tripura. Only state where there has been some gain is Assam and Meghalaya. Yeah, the Nagaland where more than 90% of the forest is under community control. There the loss has been the highest. So we have a huge community say on the resources, but at the same time we are also losing out our forest resources very rapidly as per the Forest Survey of India report. Now if you look at the legal system that we have in India to support the community-based conservation initiative, obviously we have village forest category under the Indian Forest Act, 1927, community reserve under the Wildlife Act, Biological Diversity Act under 2002, Biological Diversity Act of India 2002, then obviously the FRA 2006. But if you look at little bit in depth, none of these provisions has ever been used to its full potential to support community-based conservation. If you look at the community reserve provisions under the Wildlife Protection Act, surprisingly you will find that the descriptions of community reserves, how to demarcate it, how to notify and how to manage it, is hardly there are 6 or 7 clauses and subclause. But if you look at the descriptions that is given for national park and wildlife sanctuary, it is very, very detailed. Yeah, so there are still lots of ambiguity the way the law has been kind of articulated to support community-based conservation. We also know that now the FRA, one of the biggest questions that everybody, all of us are facing, that once community has got the CFR right, what after that? Because there is nothing much very clearly written that how and from where support to the community will come once they have secured the CFR right. Yeah, so just securing right is not enough. Actually, the way they will manage their resources, where they will benefit from that resources is more important. So there is some bit of gap. There is some bit of gap, whatever the legal provisions we have to support community-based resource management. If you look at northeastern states, we all know that during the British regime, they followed the policy of non-interference. Yeah. After independence also, under the Gopinath Bordoloi committee, there are certain important constitutional provisions were added to safeguard the rights of the community over their natural resources. One of it is obviously the Sikh schedule, which is there in Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram, and Tripura. Then in Nagaland, we have 371A. In Arunachal Pradesh, we have 371H. In Manipur, we have 371C. But again, none of these provisions has ever been used by any of the northeastern states to support and strengthen community-based natural resource management. Now, if you look at a little bit more in detail, I have done a little bit of work on to look at what is happening in Arunachal, what are the legal provisions that we have in Arunachal, Karbi Anglong, and Tripura. Interestingly, Arunachal Pradesh, we have this Anchal and Village Forest Reserve, this act which was amended in 1984. And in that act, these clauses are particularly talking about making rules for management of village forest. Yeah, so this act can be very much used to provide legal support to the community-based conservation initiative in the state of Arunachal Pradesh. Obviously, we'll have to maybe amend this clause 5 and 7 because it talks about sharing of revenue with the forest department, which I think is not required when communities. Now, whenever we talk about community-based conservation, in my experience, one of the questions that always comes is that the state don't have the resource to support this community-based initiative. Now, in Arunachal case, what we have found that under the Kempa rule, there is a provisions that state government can use the Kempa money to support this kind of a community initiative. Now, if you look at the state of Arunachal, in between 2029 and 2024, total 2,965 crores Kempa money was received. Out of this, by the end of 2024, 27% only has been utilized. Rest of the money is still lying unutilized. So there is a provisions by which this Kempa money can be used to support the community-based initiative. There is a money which is also available, but still for some strange reason, this is not working. Yeah, and I think if we look at the other states of the Northeast, what is the status of the Kempa money, almost similar kind of a situation will come up. If you look at Karbi Anglong, there is a 46% of the forest, it is under the Sikh schedule. Yeah, Karbi Anglong is under Sikh schedule, is under the village council and the local indigenous community. Now in the Sikh schedule, in the section 3, in the article 3, 224.2 and 275.1, it is very clearly written that the autonomous council can have their own set of rules to manage forest which is outside the notified reserve forest. But interestingly, none of the autonomous council in Northeast has ever used these provisions. If you look at the Mikir Hills District Forest Act 1957, which is applicable to Karbi Anglong, there is a section 17 which talks about making rules to support village forest. But this has never been used. So when we were discussing with the council officials, they were also surprised. These provisions are there, but they have never used it. Rather, they copy-pasted Wildlife Protection Act, which is being kind of enacted at Delhi. If you look at Tripura, again, around 38% of the forests are under the Tripura Autonomous Council. There also the 6th schedule provision is applicable, which they have never used it. Besides that, if you look at the Tripura Tribal Area Autonomous District Council Act 1979, there is also clearly mentioned that they can have their own set of rules to manage village forests, which they have never used, and many of them are not aware even. Even recently I had a meeting with some of the officials in Tripura, and they were surprised that these provisions are there for so long, but almost none of them are aware about it, and they are just copy-pasting Wildlife Protection Act and are trying to use it, which are alienating local community from their traditional relationship with the community. In Nagaland, we have this Nagaland Village and Tribal Council Act 1978, which authorized the village council to have their own system, forest resource management system. But I'm not sure how much this has been utilized in Nagaland also. So it is very clear that there are legal provisions. There are constitutional provisions which has not yet been used. Which has not yet been used, and which is very, very unfortunate. So it's not that we don't have any mechanism to support our community-based conservation. Now, I'll come to about this second thing, that strategy to how to really go for it. Now, across India, if you look at, these are some of the different types of community-based conservation initiative that is happening. Interestingly, based on the sum of the data that I have collected, if you look at the average size of these areas which they are managing, community are managing, you will find that ecologically most of this doesn't make much sense. Yeah, ecologically, as my co-panelist was saying, that for orang, if you are conserving any species, you have to look at the home range, ecological home range of the species. Now, if you have a CFR, which is just 0.66 square kilometer average in area, what is ecological benefit? And what is the economic benefit also the community can gain out of it? If you want to apply any sustainable resource harvesting protocol, you need a bigger space. In a small space, you cannot apply any sustainable resource harvesting protocol. So whatever kind of a way things are being done, this is also not very much which is helpful in achieving the goal of community well-being as well as the conservation of resources. Now, these are some of the kind of things that ecologically we know that what is the problem of having a smaller area. If you have a small area which community is trying to conserve, because of the age effect, its future is very, very uncertain. Yeah, because whatever the human activity or disturbance that is happening around it, it will have a severe impact if the area is very small. Then you have to also look at the ecological home range. Say, for example, for the red panda, the ecological home range is 2.6 to 1.7 square kilometer. Like in Jimitang, which is known for the red panda, if our community would have decided that we will secure 1 square kilometer area for conservation of red panda, it doesn't make any sense for red panda. It is good about the community that two villages came together and they have decided to manage 98 square kilometer area for conservation of red panda. So these are the kind of a thing also we need to take into considerations when we are engaging with community, that how much it is really contributing to the objective. If you are also not, so basically if you look at the component of CCA management, it is basically you need to have a component where communities are getting the resources which they need for the subsistence purpose. Then there is a provisions to use resources for income generations like NTFP and community-based tourism which is there. Then restoration of degraded area, and then management of biodiversity. Now, none of this can be achieved if the area is very, very small. So, it is better to try for a bigger and contiguous area. Now, this can be done, so it is obviously, it's not that small area doesn't have any ecological value. It has, but our effort should be like mostly because we are also in the mountain ecosystems. Yeah, so we should always try to have a bigger area for conservation when we are talking with the community. Because if we have a bigger area, it will provide economic benefits, it will have an ecological outcome, it will also help to mobilize the global support for to the community. So normally, maybe this is something we have thought of. You can have these three types of CCS to try with, one with a bigger contiguous space, one which may be at a smaller space where some kind of a very rare and threatened wildlife is found. You can have the small area also as a CCA. Or third, if it is a very important connectivity or it's a corridor, then also it can be a smaller area. So you can have all these different types of area in terms of area. So now if you look at the global discourse, we all know that CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, lots of things are happening there to support community-based conservation. In 2018, they came up with this term OECM, yeah, to kind of bring together all the community-based conservation initiative that is there. Now, if you look at in the Protected Planet report of 2020, the contribution of OECM was good, very high. When we talk about how much we have achieved in terms of IT target 11 that we have committed to from 2011 to 2020. Now, even the National Biodiversity Action Plan, which was submitted in 2019, whatever the government of India has reported in terms of achievement towards CBD IT target, 17% was actually there, fall under the OECM category. Now, very recently, if you look at the target 3 of Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework in the COP15, there has been commitment of securing 30% of the global area by 2030, which we popularly call 30 by 30 target. Now, obviously in COP16, there was a recognition of communities' role in this. And if you look at the 2024 National Biodiversity Strategy Action Plan that Government of India has submitted with 23 national targets, it is very clear that Government of India is also trying to give very high priority on supporting and strengthening community-based conservation. And in that context, with 14% of this area of Northeast under the community control, I think Northeastern states can play a very, very important role in terms of fulfilling India's commitment to the global kind of an CBD target 3030. But we need to decide that how really we design it, execute it, so that the two targets, the ecological security as well as the economic security of the community is achieved. Yeah, thank you.